After years of fierce rivalry, the Palestinian groups Fatah and Hamas announce a surprise deal to reconcile. As the new Egyptian leadership celebrates its role in brokering the deal, Israel warns it won't negotiate with a new unity government. So what's in the Palestinian deal, and will it work this time round? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Darren Jordon. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's group Fatah has forged a surprise deal with their bitter rivals Hamas. Meeting in Cairo on Wednesday, the feuding sides have agreed to form an interim government and promised to hold elections within a year. Israel, who said the deal was brokered secretly, said it would not bring peace to the region. Raya Rage has more.
Hamas and Fatah on the same stage in Cairo again. This time, though, after signing an agreement to end years of division.
We've agreed to form an interim government and to fix a date for the coming elections. We are committed for the sake of the Palestinian people.
We need to thank the Egyptian side for the huge efforts made in the past, made today, and that will be made in the future. We also need to thank Arab and Islamic countries for their efforts towards the implementation of the agreement and towards ending the Palestinian division.
A dramatic turn of events in the middle of the Arab awakening. Cairo itself still in a post-revolution transition, but seemingly committed to a new independent foreign policy that looks more to Arab aspirations rather than what the United States and Israel might want. Previous agreements have failed. 2007 in Mecca looked set to run, but soon after, in June of that year, Hamas violently forced Fatah out of Gaza. Nearly 4 years on, and both Hamas and Fatah have faced different pressures.
Hamas did not manage to govern Gaza and to really succeed to convince everybody that it is capable of surviving for all kinds of considerations. On the other hand, we all know what the situation that Mr. Mahmoud Abbas and Fayyad are facing. They are getting nothing from the Israelis.
President Mahmoud Abbas admitted to huge frustrations in his negotiations with the Israelis, as Al Jazeera revealed in the Palestine papers. His only choices, a push for unity and a move toward recognition of Palestinian statehood, due to be voted on in the United Nations this September. Hamas has been watching with alarm events unfolding across the Middle East, especially what's happening in Syria. That in addition to internal pressures, with young people increasingly vocal in their calls for a unity government. For years, reporters have listened to Palestinian faction leaders talk in this very room about reconciliation. But on Wednesday, the tone was different. There was a clear acknowledgement of previous failures, and that this time around they've come together as a direct result of people power. In Israel, the reaction has been cautious but firm.
The Palestinian Authority must choose either peace with Israel or peace with Hamas. Peace with both of them is not possible because Hamas wants to destroy Israel, and it says so publicly. It fires rockets on our cities. It fires rockets on our children. I think the idea of reconciliation shows the weakness of the Palestinian Authority.
For many ordinary Palestinians, though, the agreement in all its infancy is just the news they want to hear. Raya Rage, Al Jazeera, Cairo.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined by our three guests. From Tel Aviv, Akiva Eldar, the chief political correspondent for Haaretz newspaper. From Cairo, Hassan Issa, a former Egyptian diplomat to Israel. Mr. Issa was also the former director of the Israel Department for the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And from Ramallah, Mustafa Barghouti, the General Secretary for the Palestinian National Initiative. Gentlemen, welcome to the programme. Mustafa Barghouti, let me start with you. Why has this deal happened now, and do we know exactly what Fatah and Hamas have actually agreed to?
Well, it happened now because for many reasons. One reason is that the popular pressure on both sides has increased to a level that I think they haven't expected ever. I think both parties have realized that the more division continues, the more they will lose among the public, and that will affect their reputation and their popularity. A second factor has been the positive changes in the Arab world, especially in Egypt. And this has been a rather contributing good factor. to achieving this agreement. And third, it's our efforts. We've been mediating between them during the last few weeks, and we've managed to reach points of agreement. And I think one major factor that helped reach this agreement is the fact that all the negotiations with Israel has failed, and all the expectations from the so-called peace process have come to an end. It became clear that Israel does not want to make a deal even with President Abbas alone, and they have been using the internal Palestinian division as an excuse, actually, for them failing the peace process. So I believe objectively there is not much to differ about, and I think the upcoming expected events next September have been also an instrument, that a factor that pressures Palestinians to get unified as quickly as possible. Let's
put that point then, if we can, to Akiva Eldar in Tel Aviv. Akiva Eldar, Mustafa Barghouti seems to be saying that the Palestinians weren't getting anything from Israel anyway. I mean, many observers say that the Palestinians had no choice but to reconcile, that President Mahmoud Abbas was becoming increasingly frustrated with Israel. What's your assessment of it then?
And what they're doing is just before the showdown, when they seem to be to have the upper hand before September, they are playing right into the hands of Benjamin Netanyahu and Avigdor Lieberman. We are hearing different messages from Ramallah and from Gaza. I was just at a meeting with President Abbas, where he said that he is committed to the two-state solution, while we hear messages from Hamas that the unity government will turn down the previous agreements or understandings and will not recognize Israel. And this was the main question that was put by the media, and there was no clear answer. So I'm afraid that the timing is tragic, just before Netanyahu is heading to Washington to speak to the Congress. And I will not be surprised if in a few days we will witness another statement from both sides in the Congress, condemning Abbas for working together with Hamas on a unity government. So, you know, these days, the media is the story and the image is the story. It's not the reality. I fully agree with my friend Mustafa on the merits. But who is interested in the nuances when, you know, Abbas says he is committed to previous agreements? The Hamas was demonized by the international community. The Quartet put forward 3 conditions that the Hamas refuses to meet, and Abbas, who is now doing his best, and I admire the efforts he's doing to get the recognition of the UN and the international community, is giving them the excuse, as Mustafa said, not to do this.
OK, let's get a view now from Cairo. Let's bring in Hassan Issa into the discussion. Hassan Issa, the problem here, of course, is that Hamas has not accepted any of the conditions so far of the Quartet. These conditions, of course, are that Hamas renounce violence, that they recognise Israel and all past agreements. But Hamas, of course, can't play the unity game without recognising Israel, can it?
Absolutely, absolutely. But we have to realize that Hamas, during this last year and a half or 2 years, have been very much aligned with the keeping the peace and quiet with the Israelis, to the extent that we had Gabi Ashkenazi and we had Ehud Barak go up in public and praise Hamas for their obedience, for their alignment for peace and for quiet. So this is ancient history. The stance of Hamas now is ancient history. They have assigned they have assigned other Palestinians to deal with the Israelis. Of course, I agree to a great extent with Dr. Barghouti, and of course my respect to Akiva Eldar, who is also a specialist. But Hamas has been very clear in assigning the PLO to take care of dealing with the Israelis, and has been very, very, very obedient in the last year and a half in keeping the quiet with the Israelis.
Mustafa Barghouti, let's be realistic here, because Hamas basically went to war with Fatah to take over the Gaza Strip. There is deep mistrust, is there not, between both of the Palestinian factions. How was that going to be overcome in working together now?
That's one way of describing the story, but another way is to say that we had the best democratic elections in the Arab world in 2005, 2006. Hamas won, a government was formed, then we convinced Hamas to form a national unity government. At that time, we also were the mediators. We had national unity government that represented 96% of the Palestinians, and then it was boycotted by provocations from Israel and with the support of the United States. That led to division. That led to a terrible situation, and then Palestinians started to be blamed for that division. Now we are reconstructing unity, and we are reconstructing democracy. I don't understand what is the source of this double standard when many countries say they want to see democracy in Libya and democracy in the Arab world and in Syria, but they don't want to see democracy in Palestine, and that is totally unacceptable. At least for the sake of democracy, they should appreciate this unity agreement. And if you allow me to say, it seems today with our mediation, we've managed to unify. Yeah, no, but let me just finish this one. Mr. Akiva, give me the chance, please. I am trying to say that it seems we have unified not only the Palestinians, but the Israelis as well. I mean, look at the Israelis. From left to right, they are all against this unity agreement. And that is very distressful, very strange. I mean, why are they against us being unified? This is actually a golden opportunity to have all Palestinians in one camp. This is a golden opportunity to make peace with all Palestinians, not with part of them. And this Mustafa is a golden opportunity to have peace based on democracy, not on an agreement that is imposed from one side on another.
Hassan, and that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point you made. Akiva Eldar, let me put that point to you then, because if there is greater unity amongst the Palestinians, as Mustafa Barghouti is saying, isn't it in Israel's best interest to have a stronger Palestinian partner for peace? I mean, surely that makes for a more secure Israel, doesn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Absolutely, but I would like to see the Hamas turning down their weapons and offering the Fatah and the PA a unity not only in rhetorics but in practical terms, which means that there will be one police force and there will be one law and there will be also one message. I would very much like to see this. And that's what I just mentioned before. We get all kind of mixed messages which are helping Netanyahu to make this argument that the Palestinians are turning down the Israeli hand and so forth. And as long as the Hamas is not committed to zero tolerance to violence, this is just fueling the message that Netanyahu wants to deliver to the Israeli public and to the international community.
Okay.
I would love to hear from Hamas the clear voice that was saying we are willing to put down our weapons and be part of the Palestinian apparatus of security.
All right, let's put that point. Let's put that point. Let's just bring in Hassan Issa. Let's bring in Hassan Issa in Cairo here. Hassan Issa, is Hamas the stumbling block here? Would Hamas recognize Israel, recognize past agreements, and renounce the violence?
Factually, on the ground, Akiva Eldar knows that Hamas for the last 2 years have been abiding to the keeping the quiet on the borders between Gaza and between Israel. As I said, to the extent that it was praised by Gabi Ashkenazi and Ehud Barak. Hamas has proven that they want peace, that they want good relations. And as Dr. Barghouti said, the more violence between the Palestinians, and as we know, violence crosses borders into Israel. The more quiet, the more peace, the more understanding between the Palestinians, the more secure Israel is. Please, please, Akiva, you are objective. And I've been reading all your articles in Haaretz. Please be objective. And please look upon this in an objective way.
Okay, listen.
Keep the peace between the Palestinians.
Okay, I'm going to come back to Akiva Eldar in a second. Hassan Issa, let me stay with you and just broaden out this discussion just for a second, because there was mounting pressure by Palestinian youth groups in both Gaza and the West Bank. They were inspired by these pro-democracy movements in the region generally. Do you think the speed of this deal was perhaps as a direct consequence of the Palestinian leaders wanting to contain the growing unrest in the West Bank and Gaza?
Well, of course, all Palestinian leaders want this deal to come through. It is coming through. We've been trying to do this for the last 4 years. We've invited all Palestinian factions, and we exerted extreme efforts in keeping the peace, in keeping the understanding between the Palestinian factions. We felt that both sides wanted the peace, but it was outside external interventions that kept the peace away from both. Now we succeeded in getting them together to sign the paper, and I don't call it the Egyptian paper, I call it the Palestinian paper. We got them to agree upon this Palestinian paper. So please, Israel should not make waves. Israel should support this agreement for the sake of Israeli security, for the sake of security in the area.
Okay, Mustafa Barghouti, what's your assessment of how the uprisings in the Middle East have pushed both the Palestinian factions together? I mean, as I say, there was already mounting pressure from youth activists in Gaza and the West Bank.
Yes, of course. But before that, let me clarify one point. I think the essence and the truth about the Israeli position was very clearly expressed today by Mr. Lieberman, who doesn't know how to be diplomatic. He said bluntly that when Palestinians are divided, they are weak, and we want Palestinians to be weak. This is the motivation of the Israeli positions. I want to remind you that they have made peace before with Mr. Arafat, then they dehumanized him and delegitimized him and assassinated him. Now they are trying to dehumanize and delegitimize not only Hamas, but also President Abbas. Practically, there is a process of delegitimizing all Palestinians. Why? Because Israel does not want to accept to end occupation.
So let's move it on now in terms of the wider impact of what's happening. In terms of the wider impact in the region of what's happening, how have the uprisings impacted on this deal? Yes.
The impact has been very powerful in two ways, and I want the Israelis to listen to this. First of all, it has inspired the Palestinian youth. Those same Palestinians who have inspired the Arab world many times in their uprisings have been inspired by the Arab world, and this has created a very strong democratic movement in the streets of Palestine, in West Bank, in Gaza, demanding one thing: end of division and unity, demanding getting back democracy. This was a very important factor. But I want also to alert you that the uprising in the Arab world has also inspired Palestinians to believe in non-violence, in non-violent popular resistance as a substitute and as a way of getting our freedom. And I believe today, after so many years of interacting with Hamas, that Hamas has become much more appreciative of non-violence approach. And I think Hamas now is ready, and they have told me that in our negotiations with them in this mediation. They are ready for ceasefire. They are ready to adopt non-violent resistance. And this is something everybody that believes in peace should accept. But if Israel continues to blame us for what happened 10 years ago and 15 years ago, this means that Israel does not want peace, does not want progress, does not want democracy. Netanyahu sounds like an enemy of peace and democracy.
Let me put this issue of the uprisings to Akiva Eldar in Tel Aviv. Akiva Eldar, how do you think the various uprisings in the Middle East have pushed this deal together? I mean, Israel has watched events unfold in Egypt, also in Syria and in the Palestinian territories. Is Israel very much here being swept along by events? Because it seems that Israel actually has no control over what's happening here. This is a new Middle Eastern order, and Israel has no control.
Yeah, but what Prime Minister Netanyahu is doing is using the uprising and making the point that the only country that is stable, that you can trust, is Israel. And this is not the time to make dramatic moves. This is the time to watch very carefully what's happening around and not to rock the boat, which is rocking anyway. So I believe that the very important move, and I would love to have this opportunity to make it clear that I will be very happy to see a unity government and to see the Palestinians supporting Mahmoud Abbas' efforts to reach a deal with Israel, a settlement which is based on a two-state solution on the basis of the 67 borders. But what Netanyahu is doing right now is using this instability to prove that we don't have partners. And he is just waiting to see riots in the West Bank and in Gaza to make this point again and again.
No, hang on, gentlemen. Let me, because I need to get one more point here. Let me just get one more point here, Mustafa Barghouti, because we are actually running out of time. I want to just bring in the international factor here and go back to Hassan Issa in Cairo. Hassan Issa, there are many external players here, of course. Ismail Haniyeh of Hamas can't sign a deal without the go-ahead of Khalid Mashal, the exile leader of Hamas. He's in Syria. Right. Mashal can't give the nod unless Syria agrees, and Syria can't give the green light unless Tehran gives the nod. So what's very quickly brought all these external players together to say yes? Very quickly.
That is why we heard the Foreign Minister Nabil al-Arabi going directly in addressing Tehran. Tehran is a huge force in the area that should be reconciled with and should be attracted again into the Middle East. But again, when you mention the turmoil in the Middle East, we know that there are 15 countries in the Middle East uprising at the same time. This is what they call a democratic tsunami. Democracy is forcing itself on the area. A new phase of foreign policy of Egypt and the Arab world is forcing itself on the scene in the Middle East. Israel should realize this. Israel should again look upon the situation from a completely different perspective.
Okay.
The Middle East is changing.
Mustafa Barghouti, just talk quickly about the American response here. Washington, of course, sounded a cautious note saying any Palestinian government must renounce violence and recognize Israel's right to exist. Do you think Washington's caught in the middle here? I mean, they have to appease Israel, but also President Obama wants this comprehensive peace deal. Very quickly.
What we see here is another time when the United States administration must find a way of separating itself from the Israeli line and the Israeli policy. Unfortunately, the statements we heard are about the past. I think these statements relate to the previous experience. They should see the new development. They should see the new progress. They should see the new opportunity. And I hope they will see that this is a true golden opportunity for the sake of peace and for the sake of democracy. And for the Israelis, let me say, if they find that Netanyahu is doing wrong, they should start moving against him. We would like to see an Israeli peace camp, for God's sake. They are trying to ask us to do the work for them. That's unacceptable. If they want peace, they have to be in opposition to their government. They have to be in opposition to the settlers. And the United States must also respect the same universal values it is advocating in other places, which are freedom for the people, independence for Palestinians, and also democracy for the Palestinian people.
All right, let's get a quick final thought from Akiva Eldar. I mean, it seems that our guests are saying that Israel is waking up to a new Middle East order that perhaps is struggling to come to terms with what's around it. I mean, if you take post-Mubarak Egypt, many Egyptians aren't in favour of a treaty that hands a raw deal to the Palestinians. One senior official said that Egypt won't be what he called a strategic treasure for Israel when it comes to things like gas exports. Is there a worry that Israel perhaps needs a very quick strategic rethink of what's happening around it in terms of how it's dealing with its Arab neighbours and the whole issue of the Middle East peace process?
Unfortunately, the Israelis do understand English, but not Arabic. So they will be listening very carefully to what President Obama is going to say to Netanyahu and what the American Congress. I am very concerned about what might happen after September. The turmoil will only start in the West Bank, but I can see the demonstrations in Egypt and in Jordan in front of the Israeli embassies. And I believe that we may end up with a complete turmoil in the Middle East.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you to all our guests in Tel Aviv, Akiva Eldar, in Cairo, Hassan Issa, and in Ramallah, Mustafa Barghouti. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We, of course, welcome your comments and your suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team here, goodbye for now.